And we're live. We're recording once again. Welcome back, everyone, to the Solvable Mysteries Podcast. My name is Juras, and as every week, I'm joined by my co-host, Glenn Highcove. How are you feeling, man?
Hey, I'm doing okay. I've been watching a lot of the Unsolved Mysteries episodes, and we just did a show on one of the very popular ones. But I think it's really exciting that today we're going to talk about probably which is the most popular episode out of the whole show so far.
Yeah, and as we have already discussed, I and I think you as well are not in particular super fond about this episode that we are talking about. We're talking about the No Ride Home episode, and I guess the whole topic for today's case is Alonzo Brooks' death. So, so I don't know, man. I wasn't impressed because I feel like they missed even more stuff than they did on the Ray Rivera episode. But I can't blame them too much because a whole bunch of missing characters from that Netflix show episode voluntarily didn't want to be on the show because there's some negative attention being thrown your way if you're on that episode. We'll talk about one guy in particular who had like a whole bunch of backlash. So your thoughts on the show, man?
Yeah, and I think I'll try to, I guess, expand on this point as the show goes on. But my initial thoughts about the show is I'm starting to really maybe distrust the whole concept of this show. And maybe it's just sort of everybody becoming more sophisticated since back in like the 80s and 90s, we didn't have the internet. We didn't really have a good way to like fact check what was going on. We didn't have a way to talk to people for sure all across the world and come to a consensus about things. But in a way that was also, I think, safer for the people that came on these shows because there wasn't really a way to harass them very easily. Maybe you could send them mail or have phone calls. And what we're seeing now is the fact that there's social media where you and I can like broadcast stuff about our show or talk to people or have conversations with people pretty much anywhere in the world. It starts to make these conversations and maybe these aggregations of people trying to take action that isn't always well thought out. And I think that here's the other problem is when people see things on TV or movies, the unfortunate reality is people think that things are reality because that's the way they saw it, and they're not. I don't think that people are critically thinking about the fact that, this is a show that was edited for like, what is it? It's only like 38 minutes or 40 minutes, right? Each one of these. So really it's been created, you know what I mean? It's been made to be eventually shown on TV with commercials. So that's something to think about, is that they'll probably show it on like Hulu at some point with commercial breaks or something. Yeah, it's so in like 38 minutes, you can't really tell like a well-balanced and nuanced picture. And the more I watch these things, I think between this one and the Ray Rivera episode, so far those two, I was thinking that like the UFO one, because I love the UFO topic so much, I'm kind of like biased where I'm like, oh, okay, that sounds reasonable. But like maybe I'm sure it has the same issues. Like they didn't at all. They for sure came in with a point of view, and that's what I'm seeing. I actually, to the point where even the reenactments that I'm seeing, not just on this episode, but on a couple of the others, they're doing reenactments that also kind of shape their opinion. So they have the interview and they cut the interview. Like just think, as we're going to talk about later, these interviews are by no means the comprehensive, story that these people had to tell. They edited, and by edited I mean, maybe someone talked for 3 hours. They took like a couple of 5-minute segments, cut them up, and that's what they showed you. So you're missing entire portions of the story. And then they're crafting this message that I think ends up being really dangerous. And as a result, people have gotten really passionate about this, as we're going to talk about. People have kind of gotten themselves whipped up. And I'm going to stick a pin in this right now, but one of the reasons why this really concerns me is in other countries, we have seen social media make people do things that have had like really bad results and have not even been like necessarily righteous, I guess, in terms of the consequences or right-minded. So case in point, WhatsApp, for instance, is notorious for having false rumors spread in places like India and also Latin America. And what happens is you'll have like entire like riots, like you've had like race riots and hate crimes and massacres and things like that happen in other countries because of a rumor, totally untrue rumor, provably false. Someone starts it because they had a reason to, maybe religious reasons or, kind of like political reasons, and it gets out of control. And like that wasn't happening in the 90s. There were other versions of that. But I think what scares me is when you have a show that Netflix is sponsored or is at least distributing, and they're coming in here, I feel like they're doing some irresponsible journalism. This isn't to say, like I said, because I can see right now a bunch of people like yelling at their screens right now at their YouTube or their podcast and saying, what no way, that guy was, this is injustice. Okay, we're not saying that there wasn't injustice here. What we are saying is you need to be really careful about what you take as the truth. And I think what we're going to attempt to do is parse out what we know right now from fact and fiction, and also update, because this Netflix thing was filmed like a while ago, update right now what Alonzo Brooks' family is telling everybody, what they want or don't want you to do, update right now what the authorities are doing, and update right now about like what's going on in this town that frankly is getting deluged by a bunch of people like coming at them like thinking the whole town is like a bunch of, I don't know, Nazis or Klan members or something. It's like, well, wait a minute. Like we don't even know the people that did this were necessarily from this town. We don't even really know what happened yet. So that's what we're going to talk about today. So that's kind of my initial spiel.
Excellent.
About, my thoughts. Yeah.
I mean, that was an excellent breakdown right there. Okay, man. So I guess since you've said that we should talk about what we know right now and the new things that have happened ever since the Netflix thing. So I guess the most important thing is during the summer, this case got reopened by the FBI, and there's 100 racks for information, right?
Yeah. There's a big reward attached to it now. I think it was like $100,000 reward or something for information. Is that right? I believe they're exhuming the body. By exhuming, that means they're actually digging up his corpse, and they're gonna take another look at it to see if anything got missed from the initial medical examination. And just as a note, even people are like even questioning like the authority or the expertise of the guy who did that. And I think this is one of the things I think I get really bothered by now is right now everybody's an expert, and someone could definitely look at us and point to us and we're like, well, you two guys are talking about it, like, something. Oh yeah, that's true. I mean, we're just having a conversation though. We're not saying somebody is wrong because the internet or a TV show made us think so. So this is where it's interesting, because case in point, that medical examiner, there's people on Reddit, and Reddit's for sure a great source of
I love it.
Information. Yeah. Reddit is awesome in a million different ways, but like, man, like sometimes I hate making comments there because like you'll get in these like fights with dummies. But I think this is the thing is like people are going on Reddit and like saying like, well, they would have for sure solved this thing if they had even tried. And it's like, oh no, like despite what Netflix said, they did actually try pretty hard. They allocated a lot of resources. Like they did an investigation that was the same level as some of these other big investigations we talked about in our show. It doesn't mean they did everything right, and I think we will talk about that. But like I have people that kind of like, because of what's going on in pop culture and the news and kind of what different media outlets, no matter what side you're on, are telling us, people kind of assume like there's almost this like conspiratorial thinking. It's very dangerous because you need to make sure, like just because you saw something in a TV show or a movie where this was a frame up, or that other group didn't try hard enough, or the police messed it up. Yeah, for sure. Like that's been an ongoing theme. And it's funny because I'm actually pretty pro law enforcement normally, but I mean, you and I, it's almost a joke how often the cops do screw up investigations. And I think there's a little bit of weirdness on this one, but yeah, like some of the stuff I'm seeing in the comments, it's like, come on, like who are you? Like these people that are saying stuff like, oh, the cops didn't even try, and this medical examiner doesn't. Well, like, wait a minute. like, well, why do you say that? Because like someone
Right.
else on Reddit said it. Yeah.
I
So
mean,
yeah.
just to manage the time here, man. I mean, this is an excellent breakdown once again on like the situation and how people are reacting to this case. Now, the one thing before I forget, I wanted to ask you about is what kind of information could the FBI gather when they exhume a body after almost 20 years? Maybe you have more intel on what are they trying to
Yeah.
achieve there.
Yeah. I mean, so it's worth recapping what the medical examiner
I mean, let's do it.
found.
Let's do.
Which
I
yeah,
mean,
yeah, yeah.
wait. Do you want to do it right
Yeah.
now, or do you want to go into
Yeah,
the
yeah.
story?
Let's do it because I think it directly answers your question and kind of
Okay,
gets everything up
excellent.
front. Yeah, yeah. We're gonna deviate from kind of our normal structure a little bit because we're really
So
we want to value.
could I just
Yeah,
interrupt for one moment here? So I guess then the quick line of how Alonzo Brooks actually ended up dead, because I'm sure we will have people on our show that are not familiar with the Netflix thing. So he initially went to the party one day. Now, as you can see, Alonzo Brooks is a African American person. And he had a bunch of I guess Caucasian friends with him. He goes to this party out of town. Now, Alonzo Brooks is from Topeka, Kansas. He goes out of town to, how do you pronounce it? La Cringe? La Cynge. Oh,
Lacine. I think
Lacine.
yeah, Lacine I think it's French. Yeah,
Lacine. Yeah, French in Kansas. That makes sense. Okay, so Topeka. We have Topeka here. We have Lacine right here, who is, I mean, the town is like, I believe 45 miles away or like 60 miles away. Not real certain, but we can see on the map that it's over an hour drive. It's definitely over 1 hour drive. And then in Lacine, we actually have the house that pretty much Alonzo Brook went to party at. Now, there has been a whole bunch of weird details regarding who was gonna drive whom back to the house. A whole bunch of Alonzo friends did some unclear things during the party. There were some potential racial slurs thrown out in the party. I will mention this fact.
yeah.
On the show, on the Netflix thing, the friends actually said that they probably thought that Alonzo was the only black person in this party, but I found a pretty credible source that actually says that there were at least 3 people, including Alonzo Brooks, who were of African American descent. So the thing is, it's pretty hard to say if Alonzo was actually the only black person. So once again, this correlates with the fact that you've already said that a lot of people immediately jump to these conspiracies. He wasn't the only black person. I mean, I have pretty good reasons to believe he was actually not the only black person in there. Obviously,
Yeah,
he was definitely in the minority, but he was not alone in terms of his race.
it's interesting that it's even like I mean, like I said, I feel like people sort of dance around his description sometimes, where they sort of they they allege to the slur that's made about him, and I guess maybe that's why they identify him only as African American. I mean, looking at the show, and his mother's last name's Ramirez, and his mother certainly looks Latino, so I'm going to or Latina, so I would assume that he's probably like Afro Latino, like he's probably half, or he's probably a mixture of things. So just like a lot of us in America, just like my child is a mixture of Caucasian and Latino and a little bit of
Yeah.
African American in there. Yeah, so I mean, to me, yeah, he looks like he's definitely but he's a person of color, and he was, I guess, maybe it would just be accurate to say the concern that he was in an area that is mostly Caucasian. It's something like 97% Caucasian, and he was one of the. If he wasn't the only person of color there, he was one of the only
Yeah.
people of color there, and he seems to be the only person who had gotten into something in the party. So actually, I changed my mind. Maybe I'll just rewind. I'll save the FBI thing for a little bit later. Maybe it is worth quickly recapping a little bit of this weirdness about how he ended up at this party. So
Yeah, I was thinking the same
yeah,
thing. So okay, so since we're doing that, then
yeah.
let's I guess discuss the first detail that we have mentioned here, leading up to the party. Now, the party was, I believe, on April 3rd. Yeah, so on April 3rd, Brooks traveled with three friends, allegedly three friends. Now, we're gonna discuss if there were more people involved, because there is definitely people missing, at least from the Netflix thing. So one day before, or maybe a few days before they went to this party, he actually had an injury, because Alonzo Brooks, he liked to play football, like American football, and he had a knee injury, an ankle injury, pardon me, and he actually wore two pairs of socks on this trip to the party, basically for reinforcement. So I think we could pretty much corroborate that this is a correct piece of information. He did that ankle injury. Now he goes to this party, and it was a really weird situation. They pretty much arrive at this party. The timeline is really weird, because on the same day when they went to the party on April 3rd, the daylight savings time switch happens, right? That's what I found. So that's why a lot of people are finding it very difficult to actually pinpoint the exact hours of what happened when, who was with what, because the daylight saving times was in effect. So I don't think a lot of people talk about this, but it's really hard to get the correct timeline when there's a bunch of drunk 16 to 21 year olds trying to like remember what happened. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's a hard thing to do.
And even like, I think it's so funny, because now it's like, maybe it's so funny, it's almost hard to remember that now your mobile phone like automatically switches it, because it just pings off the cell tower. But back then, I don't think that was true. Like back then,
2004,
I could be wrong. Yeah, back then I think 2004, like you had to actually manually, I feel like you had to manually set your phone. Maybe I'm wrong. It's been 16 years. But the other thing is, like, your watch, for sure, there were no smartwatches back then, so for sure your watch is going to be wrong, right? So like for part of that night, your watch is going to have the wrong time.
Exactly, that's another good point. So whatever happened next is really strange. Now, two of the friends that he have went to the party with, now I do have their names, and they have actually been shown on the Netflix thing, right? So two of them, Daniel Fune and Tyler Brookhart, I don't have their pictures here. I don't think it's necessarily to show them. I mean, if people want to find them, they could pretty much find them. They leave the party within like an hour and 30 minutes after arriving to go to this other place. Now they spend over an hour driving to this party, and two of Alonzo's friends actually decide to leave almost immediately, after. So what's that all about?
Yeah, that was the part. I mean, there was a lot of weird stuff about this party, and I'm gonna put a little theory out here, and about this whole thing, because it was interesting when they gave the whole background about Alonzo. Alonzo, like, he's from the Topeka area originally, which is like fairly urban, at least as far as the Midwest goes, and in Kansas goes, and I guess it sounds like, I think probably it sounds like his mother probably got divorced or something. Something happened where his mother moved to. His mother, by the way, has a different last name than his father, but I think they were married at some point. His father's last name is Brooks. His mother's last name is Ramirez. His mother moves to Gardner. He graduates from high school in Topeka, and apparently he knew a lot of these guys from like football or something. Like he knew, like, I guess one of their younger brother, and then he moved to this Gardner area, and I guess there's some kind of cross-pollination between those two areas where he knew he had some social connections. But Gardner apparently is this really super sleepy, like, quiet little town. And so the reason why I'm saying this is, up until this point, he's not really known with this group of friends of his as being like a super outgoing, like, life of the party kind of guy. So that part was kind of weird to me. I don't know if they were used to kind of crashing parties and going to celebrations and hangouts of people they barely knew. That for sure was not my sort of socially introverted habit at that age. And I will tell you that I kind of think that, I don't know, maybe I was a little paranoid, but it also kept me safe. I had a friend who back then, he kind of, I don't know, I guess both of us were pretty shy, but at some point he started hanging out with a bunch of people, and it was kind of a similar, in some ways it was similar. There was no racial component, but at some point, like, he went to go hang out with some people, and they drove by a house where a party was, and someone broke the window of his truck with like a bottle. And I don't know, he said he didn't do anything, but I bet you he yelled something. And then like the next stop, which was like kind of one of these hangout places like this, somebody pulled a gun and then hit him in the face so hard that part of his nose ripped off. So I always think like yeah, there's this one guy who does a self-defense YouTube, and he always says that, like, you know, one of your good habits is not to go to stupid places with stupid people and do stupid things. And unfortunately, when a lot of people are drinking, even though there can be a lot of fun and you can find good social connections, you can also get some bad behavior, which is, I think, what we start to see from some of the other people at this party. But yeah, it was a little weird. So part of me wonders if maybe he was getting a little stir crazy. By stir crazy, I mean, I don't mean crazy. I mean like just getting bored, not having enough social interaction like he was used to in Topeka. He's also growing up, right? So he's like in his early 20s. Maybe he felt some kind of drive to be more social, because what happens is, yeah, you're right. Like they drive, like Gardner is like about an hour's drive from Cynge, and they drive about an hour to go to a party where it sounds like maybe just, I mean, Netflix put it one way, and the articles I've read have put it a similar way, but it's not even clear who knew anybody at that party. Basically, I mean, you go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, what I was gonna say is that before we actually discuss who was at this party, the other interesting detail was that the racial slurs were actually thrown out. And I think that's pretty much a real fact as well, that has been, like, you know, confirmed by a lot of witnesses, right?
Yeah, I mean, Justin is the only one who he doesn't, I mean, especially after all the death threats he's gotten, and maybe we should talk about that in a little bit too, with the note from the family who's telling us all to kind of relax. But yeah, Justin at this point is not saying no to anything, poor guy, but he is saying that like he didn't actually see the event that other people said took place. Now, meanwhile, it's interesting because one of the other people who wasn't at this party also disputes that this happened. It's kind of weird. So Rodney English, who's another person who's featured in the show, who has a lot of quotes and sort of, it's almost like the opposing friend to Justin's story. He's sort of the one that kind of, at least the way the show filmed it.
He was not on the party, by the way. I just want to.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, he wasn't even there. He seems to have a lot of stuff to say about something where he wasn't there. But he is sort of quoted in both this article and on the show. He kind of, apparently he was there for the search afterwards for Alonzo. But he's quoted as saying that he found what he found. So the story is that during the party, maybe there was some kind of contact or some kind of flirting or something. They're not totally clear. And once again, Netflix like reenacted something and just made it look like him and some girl were all over each other. And that's not necessarily what happened at all. We don't really know. He could have just been talking to the wrong person. There's a million things that could have happened, but Netflix, by filming something and reenacting something, now plants something in your head that you think is not you. Obviously you're us, but like, you know, some people watching the show, not you. I mean the general you. Yeah, I mean what I mean is people watch that and they think, oh well, he was hugging with some girl, and we don't really know what happened. We just know that like maybe he was, you know, obviously if you're a young guy, you're going to a party. Yeah, you're looking for maybe people to date. So something like that happened, some kind of dispute. But anyways, I guess my point was Rodney English, his friend who wasn't even there, says that what bothers him about this story, where some kind of interaction, some other guys that are there take offense and start getting into like an almost fight with him, like a shoving match or something. And,
I mean, I mean, yeah, that was the case. Now, one of the initial friends that went to the party with Alonzo Brook, I'm not really sure whether it was Daniel, Fune, or Tyler, Brookhart, but they actually split up the fight. That's what they say on the show. So I think there's definitely more than Justin who remembers the racial stuff there. Now, before because I think you want to move like really fast through the story, I think we have to mention a quick few points before we get out of hand within the story and we miss these details, right? So the other thing was after pretty much that fight happened, somewhere pretty shortly after that like scuffle that Alonzo Brooks got into with someone else, pretty much the two friends decide to leave, and Alonzo, according to the Netflix thing, is left there with Justin only. So we will definitely dispute the credibility on that area right there. Now, I definitely think it's really weird how you leave your friend who just got into a fight. I mean, they said that on the Netflix thing, so it's not like we're speculating that it may or may not happen. I mean, the people who left the party actually said on the show that they pretty much handled a fight from potentially breaking out because of some racial stuff, and then they decide to leave. So, I mean, that's definitely odd. Yeah.
Well, I mean, I would almost say like you got to go when. I mean, I feel like if that happened to me, like if I went, I don't get why they would drive an hour to a party and then stay for 45 minutes to an hour, maybe 90 minutes, and then leave again. Like that doesn't make sense. Like you should be partying at least twice as long as you drive, right? To some place.
I want to step in here. They allegedly went to some other party. So this other party could have been located pretty near this party house in Cynge, whatever that town is called. So it would make sense that they would actually go to this other party who might be nearby. I mean, it seems like they were pretty like doing like random stuff the whole day. So yeah,
that's true. Yeah, and there was something about like maybe they'd even been drinking all day, and so maybe that makes sense why they kind of, you're not making the best decisions, and you're. Maybe that's also why, because they said Justin said like Alonzo's acting a little friendlier and more out of character, not as shy and reserved. So like they said, like the way he greeted the party when they went to this party was he was like, "Hey, who wants a beer?" Which is nice. They brought beer at least, right?
Exactly. Now the next thing here. I think before we actually move into the details, the last thing we have to mention is the BS Justin stories about what he did that made him leave the party to allegedly go and get cigarettes. So the show, the Netflix thing, actually says that Justin actually went to Alonzo Brook and asked him if he could give him a cigarette because he had already smoked all of his. Alonzo said, at least allegedly, that's what is being said on the show. Alonzo said to Justin, I'm all out of cigarettes. If you're gonna go get some cigarettes, just go get some for me as well. So that's when Justin, allegedly alone in the car, drives out of the party to get some cigarettes, gets lost somewhere like 30 minutes away from this party house. I mean, the town is right there. Where are you driving to pick up the cigarettes? The town is literally right there. So you want?
Yeah, but they were saying this town though. Apparently, this town barely had anything. So this town didn't even really have like a proper supermarket. It's like, I think town is a loose way of putting it. It's about 1,000 people. Looks like it's mostly farms and like grain silos and stuff like that. It doesn't look like they even have like a proper like retail establishment. Like they may have like a gas station store or like a market, market that's open. Yeah.
But would you really drive that far away to pick up cigarettes? So yeah, let's step in here that story was completely BS. I mean, you want
yeah, but I guess he would even say it's BS from the point of view that Netflix cut out a whole lot of what he had both told the cops and the family. Like from so Justin's point of view is, hey, and maybe this is, by the way, anybody who's listening, if Unsolved Mysteries ever comes to you and wants you to go on camera, maybe this what goes on in this thing for both him and the family and other people involved is a good reason not to, because he's saying they really didn't do justice to his official story.
Right.
And, this other friend, Rodney English, says, oh, Justin's been changing his story, this and that. But, we don't really know what that's in reference to. I would say that the Rodney English guy, he comes off really believable in the show. And I just really would say, just don't judge a book by its cover, and for sure, for anybody, and don't accept, just because someone comes off well in a TV show, that they know what the hell they're talking to, because this I would say Justin says he's really frustrated right now because he would like to tell the full story, the stuff that Netflix left out. Like, for instance, he says, oh no, he wasn't alone in that car, and actually, there was a much longer story to that cigarette trip. So,
and I think we have to talk a little bit about it. So I'll just add the short version so that we could still save up some time here. So basically, Justin didn't go for no cigarette drive potentially, and he was actually not alone. He was with a friend. Now, this other friend that Justin was with in his car during this trip, he's the only person that I don't know the name of, and he's the only complete mystery man in this case. And they actually have been, and this is backed up by security footage, phone calls, etc., etc. So this drive definitely happened with Justin and this unnamed friend. Now, they actually went to the ATM at some point where Justin withdrew $200. They also went to a strip club where they got ejected pretty much immediately after entering. And I think the story is that Justin did not actually get lost. He got into a car accident, or not necessarily where it involved other cars. I think he just hit a ditch or something like that. Now, he was drunk, as well as his friend was drunk, and Justin was trying to enlist into the US military. And as we've talked prior to recording this show, a DUI is a pretty serious thing in America, and I think that would pretty much end his hopes of ever going into the military, and also he would have crazy legal issues for a DUI, and someone in his early 20s definitely doesn't feel like having those issues. So he calls allegedly some other dude called Adam, who was still at the party with Alonzo. This Adam person was actually someone from that initial posse of people who went to this party in Cynge, and he told Adam, yo, Adam, I've, he probably told him the real situation when he called, but on the Netflix thing, he said, I'm lost, and I won't be able to make it back home. Could you pick up Alonzo and drive him home? Because Adam had his own car apparently. So that was the whole situation. Now, Adam and Alonzo, miraculously, by some weird details, some weird situations, they manage to miss each other, and Adam drives out alone, or not necessarily alone, but definitely not with Alonzo, back home to Gardner. But he said, Adam did, that he thought that Alonzo had already left the party. So that was an interesting detail. Now there is this last person, Edward Smith. Edward Smith is actually not his real name. Now this person, I think, is probably the main person of interest in regards to not necessarily the suspect who potentially killed Alonzo, but in regards to being a pretty big character in the Netflix show who was completely not talked about. Now this Edward Smith person, he definitely didn't want no bad attention on his name. Therefore, he decided not to come on the show, on the Netflix thing, and pretty much he is said to be one of Alonzo's best friends along with Rodney English. Now I will say it's pretty interesting how Rodney English, the man you spoke a little bit prior to me going on this long spiel right now, Rodney English didn't knew these friends, these Justin Sprague, Tyler, and so on and so forth. He didn't knew these people, so I thought that was pretty weird. Now, the last detail here, that this Edward Smith guy also somehow miraculously misses Alonzo Brooks and no one really sees where Alonzo is or whatever. Now, the last piece of information, and now I will let you chime in. The last thing here regarding the party, and I'm not certain if you would have mentioned this, but there's a whole bunch of witnesses, and this is not mentioned on the Netflix show. There's a whole bunch of witnesses, at least definitely multiple accounts, that say that they saw Alonzo Brooks running outside of that party house at 4 a.m. Now, why this is strange? Because A, why is he running outside of a party? That's never a good sign. And then B, he had that ankle injury the day before, and he actually wear 2 pieces of like socks to reinforce that ankle. So we know that's a fact that he really did have that injury. He still runs out of the house at 4 a.m. I think it's a pretty credible theory that he runs out of the house at 4 a.m. Now the question is, why is he running out? Is he being like drunk and like just in a party mood, like running out doing some stupid stuff, like crazy stuff, or is he trying to get away from someone? That's the real question. And now I will hand it over to you, man.
Yeah, I mean, that's pretty crazy. I mean, I wonder if he was just so drunk. I mean, if it's true, just so drunk that he just, like wasn't even feeling the pain anymore. I mean, the one question I asked, and this isn't blaming the victim, but it's just, I don't know, if it were you and you went to a party, like a big party like that, where it's never really clear how many people are there. I mean, maybe, I don't know, I'm guessing like 60. I saw numbers as high as 200 for how many people had been there for other parties. Because it was sort of not, it wasn't just that. Here's the other thing where people have to really watch out what they assume from the show, because it wasn't just a place for people from Cynge. Like, there's only 1,000 people in the whole town. There can't be that many teenagers there. So it was really like, it was actually a kind of a place where a lot of teenagers and young people could go to party and get high and get messed up without kind of, let's say, adult supervision.
Yeah.
So like it's important to say that, like, just they weren't the only people who had driven, some amount of time to get there.
Exactly. Yeah, that's a fact.
I gotta ask, like,
that's a fact.
Yeah. So like if it was you, just even taking the racial component out, where there's allegations that the racial slurs were used against him, which that's pretty scary. If I were him, would you stick around? Like, I get you want to go have a good time at a party, and I don't know. His friend says that, like, Rodney English, once again, wasn't there, claims that, like, if someone had called Alonzo the N-word or anything like that, that he would have fought right away and, like, not let it go and not just laughed it off or let the fight. He said that their whole group of friends, implying like Justin and everybody else, they were like known to get down and fight and like not be afraid to fight.
Could I step in? I definitely know the question. Would I personally stay there? Well, personally, I probably would not want to stay there, and I mean that's an obvious thing. Why would you stay somewhere where you're not like welcomed? I mean, that's a pretty dead giveaway that I would not stay there. And now, what you said, that this whole posse of friends were known to get down and fight, and also Alonzo Brooks was actually quote unquote a beast. He was really good at like football, so this guy could like handle himself, what I'm saying? Like, Alonzo definitely seemed like the type of person who could definitely stand for himself. Now on the show, I don't know if you remember, but on the Netflix show, Alonzo's friends actually say, and this is a fact because I can clearly remember from the show, they say that those racial slurs, I mean, Alonzo just decided to brush them off, and he was like, I won't let this get in between me having fun. So that's a general consensus of the people who were on the show. So I don't know, man, that's pretty strange. I mean, the friends of Alonzo said that he was just like brushing it off, those racial slurs. So yeah.
That's interesting. I mean, just they seem so determined to have this party. I mean, I can't think, like, you're driving an hour. I don't think I've ever driven an hour to go to a party. Drove an hour to get to this party. Then you're getting in a fight and getting called demeaning stuff. And and then everyone's bailing on you.
Right.
Man, that's like a lot of patience for this party. It must have been one heck of a party. I don't know. Yeah, I mean, so I guess we're kind of at the crucial moment now. I think it's good
Where
timing
he
wise.
disappears. Yeah. I mean, I think we have
Yeah,
to
where he
go
disappears, and
here.
that I think will, especially because some of the scenarios around that. Well, let's just do case in point. So, yeah, I mean, to not drag it out too much. Like all these people are supposed to give him a ride home. None of them do, and there's sort of a lot of back and forth. He said about who was supposed to pick him up or who missed him or who couldn't find him at this party. But at the end of the day, he doesn't show up at home, and his mom freaks out because he always comes home. Like he's really good about that. He's a very responsible person about coming home and being there with his mother. And he doesn't come home, and right away his mom and his family know something's wrong, and they get people up and going, and they actually even show up to this place. And
The next day. Yeah.
yeah, the next day, and they try to go searching. Now, look, I'll take the town's point of view for a second. Like, you can't just have this group of people tromping around on private property looking for somebody, and that, like, as much as you want to help somebody, like, I don't know, I'm a little split on it because obviously, like it is a crucial time to find somebody, and of course, if it had been like a little kid or someone besides like a maybe somebody in their early 20s, and you could say there's other stuff involved, but it does seem like the cops don't take it super personally, where they're like, oh, he'll turn up, and his family is like, no, like this is very out of character. I don't, maybe you're used to dealing with kind of local drunks and stuff that do this, but this isn't Alonzo. So that I think I take their side on, at least as far as it was depicted.
Yeah, so one of the key areas that the investigation, initially the police, then the K.B.I, the Kansas Bureau of Investigations, as well as the FBI, the original FBI, they also have been involved. Now, one of the areas that they found very interesting to search is this creek right here that we can see on the Google Earth, right? So this creek, after Alonzo disappearance, has been searched with cadaver dogs, and there was a whole bunch of people looking throughout this creek, and they didn't find anything. The cadaver dogs didn't smell anything, nothing was found, and Alonzo was not found. And for a long time, Alonzo has not been located. Well, he was located around 28 days later, when the family of Alonzo Brooks actually voluntarily went to this house. The police station actually gave them permission to do their own search, and within 30 minutes they found Alonzo, I believe, right around this area right here. Around this area, he was lying there next to this creek around, I think, the water bed, and he pretty much was dead. But that's where the story picks up. Now, before we get into the details, I think it's time to talk about what the family actually wants to say, right, about the note. So I could just bring up the note, and if you wanna like talk a little bit about the note, you can just do it right now, man.
Perfect. Yeah. So this is why I think it's really important for everybody. As much as the Netflix show may have gotten you really interested in the case, and certainly it's very compelling. I mean, I think it is worth looking at for sure. Again, I mean, it's a tragedy. A young man's life was lost, and it feels like it wasn't really taken that seriously by authorities at the time. Though I think when you really look at it, there was some attempts, which we'll talk about in detail. But after the Netflix thing happened, like I said, once again, everybody that signed up for this thing and got interviewed, they didn't really get to see the end product until it was put on there. And I think, on the show, the family looks like they're really passionate. I mean, obviously they're passionate about it, but they look, there's a lot of like, they killed him and they did this and they did that. And it makes it sound like the family's saying he got lynched. And I don't know that the family's saying that. The family, I think, was very emotional. They may have taken the most emotional parts of their interview. They may have even manipulated some of their statements. Obviously, they do feel like it is a suspicious death, but what they've done is there's a subreddit just about this case on Reddit, and there is a message that was posted on the family's behalf there. It looks like it was a Facebook message, and this is posted by Angie Ramirez Cox, who I believe is his sister. Ramirez is, it's again his mother's name, last name. So I'm just going to really quickly read it because I think it's really important for everybody to hear this. And it's really important because people have been getting harassed in this town. This town has sort of had its whole name branded as like maybe some kind of racist town where lynchings happen. I'm going to get into some of those figures about like where lynchings have actually happened. And it hasn't been really good in Kansas at all. So it's important to mention that it's not dispelling the possibility that something happened, but let's not get it into our heads that this place is at all some kind of notorious area for like horrible race crimes and, like this is just routinely something that happens. If something like this happened, it is a freak occurrence for this town. So here's the message. Message on Facebook and reposted on the subreddit for Alonzo Brooks is from the family. As some of you may know, but for ones that do not, the FBI has reopened Alonzo's case with a reward of $100,000. We are hoping this may entice someone to come forward with information leading to an arrest. The family deserves this case to be solved. Alonzo's parents, siblings, grandparents, his nieces and nephews, along with his aunts and uncles and cousins have waited too long and deserves justice. And the spelling errors and grammatical errors are theirs, just so you know. Now, with that being said, the FBI needs to be focused. They spelled that wrong again. Focused on their job by committing their entire time trying to solve this case. They cannot dedicate their entire time by doing this if people out there are threatening the town, names that are on social media as well as the ones who have been interviewed on Unsolved Mysteries show. You are not helping matters. You are only taking the agent's time to investigate the threats. So stop with the threats. You are not helping. You are adding to the problem. I would hope, and God forbid, anyone that has to go through this would have to wait this long to get justice for their loved one. When they get that chance, no one would cause their agent to have to stop what they are doing with this case and take a detour to investigate some senseless threats. If you are making threats, you are not looking out or on the side of Alonzo. So just think about that. We are not that kind of family. We don't want that kind of help. Again, stop with the threats, and that's in all caps. So this is one of the reasons why I had that whole long preamble at the beginning of the show is, apologies for the person writing this. I think tried their best to convey this message properly.
I mean, why do you always pick on people's grammar, man?
Yeah, I'm telling you, me and my sister were talking about. She's like, you know what? I also thought it was weird too. He wrote that. Yeah, that Ray Rivera, man. I don't know that for a guy that was writing a newsletter professionally. I don't know that. Maybe he must have been really out of it when he wrote that note because I was. So well, anyway, everybody. You know what it is? I guess I'm super critical about that. But yeah, I mean, obviously the message is crystal clear that, I don't think that they appreciated how things were depicted in that Netflix show either. I don't necessarily, even though there is some kind of acrimony between them and Justin, by no means did they want anybody associated with the show to have this kind of social media, internet lynch mob coming at them. And I think this is the scary thing. We're seeing this, I'm not going to get political here, but we're seeing this where people are really quick, and maybe naturally so, to get on their high horse and to get whipped up into a frenzy. It's almost like the old days when like something would happen, and instead of everybody waiting for the system and waiting for the laws and the system we have in place to deal with this appropriately, this is why we have a legal system. This is why we have things that, even though they move slowly, presumably in many cases they move correctly, because people do things out of emotion without enough information and with a very biased. And this is where I wish Netflix or Unsolved Mysteries would do more to, on the front end of this show, put a little disclaimer, because I mean, even though it kind of undermines their message, it really is kind of scary to think that, you're in this town, you had nothing to do with this, presumably, if anybody from the town had anything to do with it, most of them didn't. Yeah. Most of them don't need, yeah, to be dragged through the mud like this. So,
Exactly.
yeah, I mean, one final thing. So before we get into the theories, we're just about to kind of polish this off.
Right.
I did a little digging. I'm like, look, maybe I'm ignorant. For sure, there have been a lot of like things that have happened in the Midwest. Like we're finding out about kind of things that happened in the past to people of color that have been pretty shameful and sometimes incredible. Like there was like actual like bombings and like almost
Like
mass
bombing
bombing like in Tulsa, I think was
people
one
of
of them.
color.
Yeah, like
Whoa.
there have been things that happened in like the earlier last century.
God
There
damn.
were things that were kind of hidden where like there was like things where we actually like the government or people acting on behalf of the government or racist actually did like kill a bunch of people of color. Not just the lynchings that happened, and it is interesting to note that
Wow.
lynchings were not all just people of color. There was also a significant number of white people that were lynched as well. Lynching is basically extrajudicial justice, but sometimes it was done for no good reason at all to anybody, just because of their, them looking the wrong way or doing something that offended somebody.
I don't think there's a good reason to lynch anyone ever.
Well, I mean, sometimes it would be like horse thievery or murder or something like that. So sometimes lynchings happened to anybody, not just people of color, like, some white robber or something like that. They might get lynched just because people didn't feel like waiting for the town marshal or the state marshal. But anyway, regardless, I said, well, let me dig into this because, yeah, there have been things that we're only finding about now, things you didn't learn in history class. Like I think there's a big awful one that happened in Tulsa, Oklahoma, stuff that happened near there. But I looked in Wikipedia under a whole list of kind of in the 19th century lynchings, and I actually found more racist lynchings in like New York than I found in this area. I could not find a single one in Kansas. Nothing about Cynge. Yeah, it was interesting for all these lists of famous lynchings. And there's a good number of them, and like I said, it's not just people from one background. I mean, there's lynchings of people all across people get killed by outraged people all the time for lots of stupid reasons and lots of awful racist reasons, and sometimes not racist reasons. Sometimes just people are mad about something. Yeah, not really anything. And maybe, who knows? Maybe in our comments somebody will find something good and point out. But yeah, there's no like real, other than what we already know about American history and about, racist groups like the Klan. There wasn't anything that made this town stick out where there was some kind of like, secret chapter of the Ku Klux Klan living there, or, Nazi group or something. So, yeah, to that point, I think now is a great time to get into kind of the different theories.
Excellent that you've mentioned this. Now, I actually want to stay here for a few more minutes. Actually, regarding this particular town, like I can't really pinpoint the credibility of the sources that I've read, but like a lot of sources state that this town was known to be racist. So that's just like that's just like what I've heard. So I don't know, man. Maybe it doesn't show up on the like statistics, but also there's this feeling that everyone in this town knows what happened, and it's a big it's like a big closed secret. But obviously I find it hard to believe that everyone in a town is completely racist and no one is spilling the beans. I mean, that's definitely. But now let's get into the, I think, theories.
Just real quick, just to finish off that thought. I mean, I have to wonder, for people that are saying that, do you really know that? Is it because you talked to people from that town and that's what they said? Or is it because you looked at the demographics and you just assumed that a town that is 97% white is automatically racist because, I don't know, some news agency told you so? So like there's, believe it or not, there's some parts of the United States that are predominantly one demographic, and they're, and it could be mostly white or mostly black. I mean, or sometimes it's not mostly anything, like where I live in Los Angeles, where we're pretty evenly split at this point, 3 or 4 different ways. But it wasn't always like that. 50 years ago, Los Angeles was actually mostly Caucasian, and there's regional changes. So I want to make sure people aren't saying, oh, well, since it's 97% white there, they must be racist. Like you don't know that. I mean, that's just speculation. But yeah, there are a couple of personalities, I guess, that have been identified, which I think out of we're going to try not to identify them by name just based on that note from the family, but maybe we can kind of generally refer to some theories where maybe a couple of people who are known to the town may have done something.
A specific family, you mean? There's this specific family. I mean, they're like called like the Boons. So I don't know, man. The rabbits out of the hole. I just like out the bag. I just said it. Because I mean, you really don't need to look far to see what Reddit is talking about, and they're talking about one specific family. Let's hold it there. Actually, I think you will have to also give us some more details because I think you're a bit better equipped to do so. Now, Alonzo's body was actually discovered on that creek like 1 month after his disappearance in the same area where the FBI and K.B.I, the Kansas Bureau of Investigation, so some serious dudes with some serious cadaver dogs, checked, but they didn't find Alonzo in the first place. Now, 1 month after their search, the family members within 30 minutes locate the body, and the body was out in the open. So I'm like, this in my head is a complete 100% undeniable fact. The body was not there, and on the initial search, and even the police and FBI and everyone agree that the body was definitely not there on the date when they searched. But 1 month later, Alonzo's dead body now is right next to the house, pretty much, like literally, like like I don't know, like 100 meters away from that party house, next to the creek. So I don't know, man. I think it's time for us to talk a little bit about the what the coroners, or I mean, definitely not the coroners. I mean, who are these people?
Yeah, it's basically the same thing. Medical examiner.
Exactly.
They're almost synonymous. Yeah.
So you wanna discuss a little bit about that? I think you did more research.
So a couple of things. One is when they did the search. So they at least spelled this out on Netflix. Was, the creek. When I think of a creek, I mean, a creek is not like a very huge volume of water, but it sounds like this creek because it is in kind of a rainy area of the United States, and it says the creek got to about 3 feet deep during this part of the season. So that's enough to drown in, certainly, but it might also be enough for a body to flow in. Now, it turns out that later on, there were actually some more rains, and the creek got higher after this. But they said that they searched to about a 3 foot deep level because that's how deep it was. Now, when I looked on the Netflix show, once again, I guess we're kind of at the mercy of what Netflix wants to show us. On the map, it looked like they searched basically from like what you're showing there. If you drew a line kind of like across, like to the left, which I don't know what direction that is, but across to the left, I guess the creek is on your picture.
Yeah.
This is also the same view Netflix did. So whatever direction down is, that's the direction the creek was flowing. I don't understand why they did this. Like, I feel like they should have looked in a whole radius around this creek. But to me, the way Netflix showed it, it looked like they only searched like laterally from the house and down river for about, I don't know, a few hundred yards. And I don't really understand.
So
you know what I'm saying?
They searched down the stream. They didn't search up the stream. Okay.
They didn't search look how like there's parts of that creek that are not really that far from the house. Like, even though they're, like the length of the creek there, it's long, but like, so like a body could take a long time to get from kind of that upstream point down to them. But like, you could walk from the house. You know what I mean? Because the creek is so wavy, the creek takes like 2 or 3 times as long to get to the same place by the house or downstream, where he was found, than like, you know what I mean? Than if you just walk there.
I mean, one last thing. I think we forgot one important detail. Now, Alonzo's actual hat and shoes were found.
So by the road.
The hat was found on this side of the road, I believe, here, and the shoes were found on the other side of the road. And the shoes, it's very important, the shoes pointed to the direction of the creek. So the shoes were placed somewhere around here, and they pointed to the direction of the creek. I think this is very important because it sort of almost leads us to believe that, I don't know, man, it's either, Rodney English said that he believes that it almost seemed like a car drove outside the house and they threw the hat on one side and the shoes on the other side. I think that's a pretty weird thing to do, but I think this sort of indicates potentially that either voluntarily or involuntarily, Alonzo may have actually entered this body of water. I don't know for what reason though, but it seems like it may have happened.
Well, that was one thought. And by the way, somebody else disputes his version. So, like, once again, we only have him saying it. We don't really have like anybody else saying this. I don't think on the show about the shoes. We have like his version because someone else in one of those articles we sourced for this, unnamed source, but supposedly should know what they're talking about, claims that the shoes were actually found not how Rodney described them, which was apart and like one shoe here, a shoe there, but like they were together and pointing.
Yeah,
like they were like together.
Yep.
Yeah, so that's one thing. It's funny if it happened the way Rodney said, which is like shoe on one side of the road, another shoe on the other. What I thought of is, and sometimes people get hit by cars, they get knocked out of their shoes. It sounds so ridiculous. It sounds so cartoony, but it's real. Like people all the time when they get knocked out, knocked down, hit by a truck. I was thinking, is it possible that he got hit on the road and then somebody didn't want to get like a hit and run? Someone didn't want to get in trouble for it, so they, I don't know, stuffed him in their trunk and then dumped him down the road later. I was thinking about that. And I was like, well, you would think there would at least be blood marks or skid marks or something.
DNA?
That would show that.
Cadaver dogs?
Yeah, exactly. Some kind of streak or something. So, well, here's the other thing is when they find his body eventually, and once again, it's weird because like you said, they found it really close to the house. And they're like, come on, search team. Like, the family, by the way, was mad because they said that the sheriff wouldn't let them near the area for 30 days. And then as soon as they go looking for like an hour, they're like, oh, look, we found the thing we've been asking you for a month.
Wouldn't you be mad?
So I get whether... Yeah, I'd be pretty upset. I'd be like, come on, like, did you guys even try? I mean, well, imagine if you're like that team that spent all that money in your town budget, big search, like 30 guys or whoever it was, this big dive team, and you're like, come on, like we look there, right? Like, right? Didn't we all look up and down this river? So what they say is, well, he must have been somewhere else in the river and covered under weeds where we didn't look, and then broke loose with the more rains.
Right.
And that's why he washed up. Like, he was left basically there. Here's my question to you, because one of the other theories is, he was maybe like kidnapped and tortured, whether he was even like my hit and run thing, where like somehow his body was not there when everybody looked, and then someone later came back and. Yeah. Whether they killed him off-site somewhere, there was like rumors that like somebody was bragging that they tortured somebody with a electric dog collar, all these things. Why would you leave the body right there? Like, why wouldn't you just stick them in a hole somewhere where they can never be found? Like, why would you ever...
Excellent point,
right?
Here. Yeah, I mean, to add to what you've said, well, so since I've referred to the Boone family, I mean, I don't think they're going to sue us or whatever, so I'm just going to say it. The Boone family allegedly was a well-known family in this town, and they had good connections, and you can find this information on Reddit, so I'm literally just saying what I've read on Reddit, so, don't come after us, please. Pretty please. So the Boone family, there were like two brothers. I'm definitely not gonna name them, and they had like a niece or something like that at the party as well. And there are theories that Alonzo Brooks was actually getting intimate with this one white girl, and that could have caused a rift between the members of the Boone family and Alonzo. So whether that happened or not, we currently don't know. We might find out soon though. Now the interesting thing there is that the Boone family actually owned, at least at that time, a restaurant that had a freezer, and that restaurant was in the same town. I can't really locate where that restaurant is. Now there are theories that, and this is like what the family says, so I think it's very important to mention during the podcast, the family says that they believe that Alonzo's body was actually killed. They don't really know when it was killed, whether he was killed on the day of his disappearance, whether he was tortured for a few days and then killed, which would not really make sense because the medical examiner found absolutely no entry points of like any stab wounds, any puncture points in his body. The only interesting detail was that the soft tissue around his neck had completely dissolved, so there was really no way of saying whether or not Alonzo Brooks was strangled or not. So maybe the family says maybe he was kept somewhere, strangled, kept in a freezer, potentially in that restaurant's freezer. Then after the search was done, the FBI and K.B.I search was over, and when they heard, because this is a small town, so things really like the rumors spread like wildfire in towns like this. At least that's what the family say on the Netflix show. They say that once the Boone family, or not necessarily the Boone family, I think I shouldn't focus on the Boones, some other people that may have killed Alonzo, once they heard that the family was gonna go and do their own search for Alonzo Brooks, they decide to plant the body next to the party house in the creek, and pretty much to get rid of the body. Now, it makes absolutely no sense to me. So if I don't know if you wanna get at me at the comments, please do. We could discuss this. It makes no sense to me to kill someone, keep him for however many days in a freezer, then return the body to the creek. I mean, the creek is next to a house that people live in. I mean, sure, you could do it at night, I guess, but still, it's a bit of a hassle, and you could easily implicate yourself by leaving the body, by accidentally leaving a piece of your own DNA there just so that the family could find it, and then you would sort of expect it to be written off as an accident. But how would you expect that, since the FBI was involved? They did their own search with cadaver dogs, and they searched that place pretty thoroughly. Why wouldn't you leave the body somewhere down the stream? Let's say, I don't know, like a mile down the creek? Why would you leave it right next to the house? You know what I'm saying? Like, wouldn't it make sense to leave the body like way far away from the creek? A, it would be safer to plant that body there, and B, it would make a lot more sense, and the story that Alonzo Brook drowned and only now the creek and only now the body was found would make a lot more sense than placing it right next to a publicly owned house by someone else who may have spotted you during the night, pretty much planting a body. Alonzo was a big guy. To plant Alonzo there, it would take some effort. I don't know, man. That's just my end of the line of thinking that, man, I find it really hard to believe that his body was actually placed later on. You know what I'm saying? Like, he was like kept somewhere, then killed. Sure, that would make sense. But then to get the body and place it right next to the creek, why don't you just like bury it somewhere? Just like make it one of those Wikipedia articles that never get solved. You know what I'm saying? Like, we have a bunch of them right now.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, look how much farmland there is all around there, and that's not even counting other ways you can get rid of a body, some of which were covered in some of the other Unsolved Mysteries episodes. I mean, what the medical examiner found, and I mean, this is where you have to really ask, like, what are people saying? Are they saying he was just completely wrong? What he found was there were no broken bones, there were no penetrative injuries. The body was actually in, I guess this is where it gets suspicious for some other people, because the body was actually in pretty good shape. But he also discounted the theory that it had been kept like in any kind of freezer, because he said there's certain things that happen to the tissues that I guess are giveaway clues that something's been refrigerated or frozen. Yeah, there was no sign. The only part was, it was the neck. The neck was the only thing where you couldn't definitively tell because I guess animals or something had chewed on that part of the body. You couldn't really tell what had happened there. You couldn't disprove, nor could you prove, either way, that he had been strangled or something else had happened to his throat. Now that also, I think, mostly disproves my speculation about him getting hit by a car, because you would think any kind of accident that took him out would have at least hurt his head or done something else to him if it didn't break some other bones in his body. Yeah, it doesn't. I get that people are disturbed by it. I get that the circumstances are very inconvenient for just a simple death. There's a lot of unanswered questions. And then, yeah, like his shoes turning up, his hat. I guess at this point I don't feel super comfortable speculating other than like the only theory I can think of how he wasn't murdered be that he got super drunk at this party. At some point he wanders off looking for his friends and maybe is really drunk. At some point he loses his shoes or takes them off because maybe he's going to wade in the creek.
I just wanna stop you right there. 4 a.m. he runs out of the house.
Yeah, well, somebody said that they saw him running,
a bunch
right?
of people.
So
a bunch of people.
Okay,
I
so a bunch
think
of people.
it's like multiple accounts at this point.
Yeah. So that's weird. I mean, I don't. Like I said, you don't know what kind of state of mind he's in. We don't even really know what they were. Like we hear some mention of alcohol, but we don't know exactly what. Like there's beer. There's maybe a keg there. We don't know what else anyone's taking. I don't know if this is like meth territory or not. I mean, certainly there's nothing. Like, once again, no, because the Midwest and this. I mean, this is definitely meth area. I mean, the only thing is with these Netflix things, they definitely are not. I mean, this is my big criticism with the Ray Rivera thing. We don't hear anything that contradicts sort of the narrative that they want to depict. So in Ray Rivera's case, we heard nothing really about his mental health history.
Oh, yeah.
So we don't really hear anything about any of these other people's drug habits. Like I think one of the articles about Justin was saying that Justin, was both high and drunk when he got into that accident, and that was why he didn't want the cops showing up, didn't want to report, didn't want to say a lot of things that were self-incriminating. And then we said, like you and I were saying before the show, might also be kind of embarrassing to mention to like your friend's mom that you went to a strip bar. Like that's not super fun to talk about. So that might make somebody hold back on some key embarrassing facts about what was going on. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, I just know people do a lot of stupid things when they're drunk, and like I'm no exception. But
Same.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it does sound scary. Like it doesn't sound not suspicious, right? It does sound suspicious that like all this bad stuff happening. He loses his ride. He's like the only one there by himself with a bunch of people who may or may not have been super unfriendly to him. He is seen running out of a house. His shoes are off him, and then he finally dead body shows up where they'd already searched. Like, yeah, no wonder the FBI is pulling up the body. But like to your
what I was gonna say is that I think I could sort of explain how the friends sort of missed him. So allegedly he runs outside of the house at 4 a.m. Now the timeline is definitely choppy, so I'm definitely not saying that it was exactly on 4 a.m. It could have been at whatever time, because it was the daylight saving time day switch, like the day when the daylight time switches and stuff like that. So what I'm thinking is maybe he does run out of the house. A lot of people don't see him running out of the house, especially his friends. They don't know that he just ran out to the house. Maybe because Justin is too busy going to a strip club with his friends and cashing out at the ATM, and some Adam guy, who knows what he's doing and whatever is happening with him. We don't have any information on him, as well as on Edward Smith. Maybe Alonzo does run out, his friends doesn't see him run out, and after a while Adam is like, oh man, I really need to get back home. I'm quite drunk. I mean, everyone was like drinking there, but they also had cars, so I think that's pretty weird. But like they sort of all of Alonzo's friends, they just drive out of the house to drive back home, and they all think that Alonzo had either hitched a ride with some of the other friends from that group of friends, or they're actually too drunk to even care about Alonzo. They're like, oh, I can't find him, let's just drive out. So I think that could have been the situation. That's how they missed Alonzo running out of the house, is because, you know, everyone was like too busy getting drunk and then worrying about what's the fastest way I can get out of this party, because I just want to go home. And no one was like, I can find him, he probably went with someone else, I'm going home. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I really like that theory. I mean, to your earlier question about what the FBI is going to find, I don't know. I mean, unless they have some kind of indication that there was some kind of weapon used that they didn't initially look for, I can't imagine what they think would still be there after all this time, after his body was prepared by the funeral home. It was buried. It's been sitting in a grave all these years. I mean, and by the way, like I said, there's been a bunch of people that have been kind of insinuating the medical examiner didn't know what he was doing, because there's a New York Times story which you can't even read like unless you register with that. It's kind of behind like a pay gate now, probably. So many people were trying to go see it. But by the way, he wasn't ever convicted on anything. Like there was some kind of insinuation, some kind of investigation that maybe he was maybe like selling organs out of bodies, or
God damn.
I mean, which insinuation. He was never convicted of anything. Never, not necessarily. No wrongdoing was even necessarily found. Like someone made an accusation. They said he wasn't doing his job right, or he was being sloppy about his job. He actually sued for $3 million. Some of these people, I think, including the paper. So, and I couldn't find anything else that said that this was ever resolved any other way other than like someone made an accusation. So like, once again, hey, internet detectives, don't think that like because you found this article that it means anything. There's been a lot of people.
Aren't we internet detectives?
Yeah, I mean we are, but we're not. But we'll I think we take a more balanced view sometimes, where people say, well, case closed, just because of that means this finding. Like, look, there's a lot. Like, have any of you ever messed up on your job before? Does that mean that everything you ever did?
It's like a daily basis for me, man.
Yeah. I mean, you know what I mean? It's like, and people don't even know. There's not really, like, from what I can find, it wasn't ever proven that he did anything wrong. Somebody made an accusation. So, like I said, I see a lot of like confirmation bias with this and a lot of things, but this one, for some reason, people get super whipped up about it. And yeah, I think it's important for us when we cover this thing to really say, like, look, guys, like, if this is what this Unsolved Mysteries show has to offer so far,
yeah,
I don't know, man. It's not super promising. Like the UFO one. The UFO one, I want to actually. I need to go look up on Wikipedia and see that. Like even that's making me. It's undermining my faith in it. But yeah, I mean, I even found myself in one of the other episodes.
Yeah.
It was one where this dude's mom disappeared, and they found, spoiler, she turned up dead, like in pieces, like a year later or 2 years later.
Jesus Christ! What the hell?
The dude's stepdad. Apparently, I don't know. There's a whole thing about his stepdad, whether his stepdad did it. But the dude's stepdad locked him out of the house that night. And, like, you watch that and you're like, and then he even admits it, though he makes some excuse. And you're like, dude, you're a dick. Like, what? Like you sound like an awful person. But then once again, we don't know everything else that happened. And, like this kid who's all grown up now, he's got like a big scar on his face. And he looks like he's lived some kind of rough life. He's got like an AK-47 tattoo in his forearm. I'm like, well,
that's a good sign.
I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, this doesn't really look like.
I mean, right.
I don't know.
Right. Before we
just be careful.
Yeah. Before we like actually go into other places, I think it's about time to like wrap it up here, because I feel like I think we pretty much said everything we wanted to say. So I guess to round it all up, the main points is that currently the case is open. There's 100 G's on the line by the FBI. So if you want that money and you know something, you could definitely go and call the FBI and try to get that paper for yourself if you know someone who did it. Now, the family members, they said, as Glenn mentioned during the show, stay out of the investigation, don't threaten anyone, because you're only complicating the search and the justice for the family that has, not yet been given to them, because we don't really know what happened to Alonzo. So given that, I think it's time to sort of just mention just quickly mention, because I don't feel really strong about this case, but what I'm gonna say is definitely the most unpopular opinion regarding this fact, because I've seen a bunch of people on YouTube and things like that. I personally, as of yet, don't see any actual evidence that he was killed. The case is really strange, and you could pretty much say that it's definitely super eerie, but I just don't see that he was, that some foul play was involved here, or at least foul play to the extent where he was murdered and his body was kept in a freezer and then just dumped right next to the house a month later. I just don't see that right now. Maybe the FBI can change my mind, or maybe the audience can as well, because I'm definitely thinking that a whole bunch of people is gonna not like me for saying that I don't see that he got killed. So I mean, it is what it is. I have to keep it real here with everyone. I don't think, man, as of right now, I think there's probably not that much foul play involved here. I mean, your thoughts?
Yeah, I'm thinking I'm right with you. It's like, it's for sure worth looking into. It certainly seems like, just from a public opinion point of view, the FBI can't not do it at this point. There's so much furor. And look, if something comes up and they have something that is a legitimate lead, I mean, yeah, let's look into it. Let's make sure that if there's justice to be had, it's to be done. But yeah, at the same time, like, internet lynch mobs are super scary, and I don't think so far this Unsolved Mysteries show has been done very well at all. It's super biased. It does not. Every time I see it, I watch one of these episodes, I get like a really bad feeling that it's almost like a hit piece. It's really biased, and then the reenactments on top of it. I'm really not getting a good feeling compared to a lot of other things we watch. So I guess now that we polished it off, I did want to mention, by the way, like this part of the show where we always thank everybody who supports us, and always tout that, like, our show is growing faster than ever. Yeah. Our podcast, we've been seeing a lot of great results. Been seeing a lot of great folks following us on Twitter and interacting with us there. More and more comments every day and every week. But I want to do a special shout out. We had a Redditor who we hadn't even really promoted ourselves on Reddit, I guess, because I don't know, it's kind of hard to do that sometimes, and we just been busy with so many other things. But a user there named Shares Hair Clip just randomly mentioned us on the True Crime Podcast subreddit, and we saw our podcast downloads like triple or double, I guess, double for our record, but kind of triple our daily average. We hit a new benchmark on our YouTube subs. This person really did us a solid. So Shares Hair Clip, if you're still listening, thank you. We really appreciate your honest and heartfelt mention of our show, and it's users like you that really make this worth doing.
Yeah, definitely. Also, I would like to thank you as well. That was pretty cool of you to do. So so that was it for Alonzo Brooks' case. It's still up in the air, to be honest with everyone. If we find some more information, we should definitely come back here. And also, I'm looking forward to the FBI investigation. Not really certain what they can find after exhuming a body who has been dead for 20 years, but I guess that still is in the future, and everything is still in the future in regards to this case. I hope everyone enjoyed this episode, and as always, catch us on the next week's episode. For now, guys, stay safe and peace out.